So I want to thank you all for coming today. I know it's a Friday afternoon and it looks like a beautiful day outside. I haven't gotten out yet, but I wanted to bring you all something that I've been thinking about this week, and it's about preventing employee injuries. When I was in business for 19 and a half years, I actually had 2 incidents where my employees were injured, and each one turned out differently. So I'm going to share that with you as I go through my information, and maybe you all will have something to share as well. So what I always try to do, you all, is when I hired someone, I know you all probably do hiring online a lot more than I did when I was in business, because I sold my business in 2018. But one of the things that I did when that person showed up for me to interview them or to do their paperwork, I was assessing that employee for the things I thought they were capable of, what type of client I could put them with. That was all part of the process. And then as I got further down into the interview, I would ask them, do you have any lifting restrictions? That's just a very general question. And you'd be surprised what you would hear sometimes. They would say, well, I can't lift anything more than 10 pounds because I hurt my back, such and such and such. Then right then and there, it's not that you don't hire that person, but you know that that person has restrictions. So you don't send them to a home where there's a client that's a bed client that has to have some assistance or anything where they may further injure themselves. So I didn't say I wouldn't hire them, because I did many times, but I was careful as to where I put them. So I also know that you all have these automated systems now that do client assignments for you, or you have a scheduler that may not know what the client looks like or what their capabilities are or what the aide is able to do. I'm hoping these systems have that. But you just need to be careful that your system just doesn't go in there and automatically assign someone to a client where they're not capable of safely handling that client and being safe as far as not getting hurt. And that's exactly what I was talking about there. What these systems look at mostly is the availability. Are you available from 8 to 6 on next Tuesday? Well, that's all well and good. But if Miss Jones is 67 years old and she's just doing a little work on the side and she kind of wants to sit with somebody, she can do a little bit of cooking and a few things like that, then that's okay if that's the case. But what if you send her to a bed client and she really can't help that person and tries anyway and ends up injuring herself? So that's when the human factor comes in. And when I get done, if you all know of systems that allow you to enter information and take all this into consideration, I would love to hear it. And so you all have a nurse or a service supervisor going out to these clients every 90 days or whatever that interval is. They're looking at hazards in the home. They should do that on the initial assessment. They should look at all the things in the home that may affect your employee or the client. I think I told a story last time where I told you all about the client that I had that had these huge, mean dogs in the yard tied up. So when I went up to that house, I would not get out of the car until the family member came and really escorted me in. And so I made sure my employee knew that as well, that they knew I didn't want them to be bitten by a dog or to get hurt, because I always analyze this business as 2 major factions that you're dealing with. You're dealing with the employee side and the client side. And both of those must be catered to, cared for, and they must be safe at all times. So that's kind of how I boil that down. And neither is any more important than the other as far as from a business standpoint. So that's how I want you all to view that. So make sure that on your supervisory visits, that there is some way that nurse or service supervisor is going in there looking at, are there hazards here? She's looking at hazards for the client, of course. Do they have a lot of rugs in the house? Is there clutter? And then for the employee, you look in that bathroom and see, does the employee have enough room to move around to help get that person in the shower and out? There's just always things that we need to assess every 90 days. And then your employee should let you know if there's something that changes in that home before that 90-day supervisory visit. They need to be calling you, because you're not going to send your nurse if everything that is good. They're going every 90 days. But what about if they were there 2 weeks ago and then something major happened? Your employees should be letting you know any changes in that home, positively or negatively, so that you can react to it should you need to. So let me talk about insurance. You all, in the state of North Carolina, if you have more than 3 full-time employees, you should have workers' compensation insurance. So when you initially come into this business, you have to get your workers' comp policy when you get to that level. And all of this, you can talk to the Department of Labor, Department of Insurance. That's where you can get your details. But when you start out and you go to an insurance agent to get this policy, they're probably going to give you a rate of anywhere from 4 to 5% of your payroll. Is kind of how that works out. I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but that's your rate. So if after you've operated, each year that you operate and you don't have a workers' comp claim, you start to get something called an experience modification, an experience mod. And if you have no injuries for 3-4 years, then when the insurance company goes to check your experience mod, which is how they make your rate, they'll see that it's really low, that you haven't had any injuries, and your rate may go from 5% to 4%. That can be significant. So you're paying less money in insurance. So it's good not to have an injury for that reason. And of course, when I was in business, one of the things I said is I never wanted anyone to get hurt on my watch. I don't want you to get hurt on my job. I did not start this business for people to get hurt or broken down. So I tried to make sure my employees were working in a good environment. So talking about that, the insurance, when I guess when I had been in business for, it might have been more than 10 years, I had this wonderful aide working for me. She had a client that was Total Care. The lady had a Hoyer lift, and this aide was so good. She was always at work on time, left on time. Her paperwork was perfect. I never announced when I was coming for a supervisory visit. Everything was in order. The client was clean. It was just, she was wonderful. So one day she called and said that she had hurt her arm. And so I knew that she was just, and she had been with me for maybe 4 or 5 years then. She was not the type person that would fake, because she was honest. I mean, I knew her by then. So she did have to stop working in order to go, and she filed a workers' compensation claim. And so I was always okay with that, because I knew what a good employee she was. And as I said before, I didn't want to hurt anyone. So finally, in order for her to get her payments as she needed, my insurance company was making her prove everything. They were trying to be sure it wasn't fraudulent. So she finally had to go to court to file a claim. So what that meant was that my insurance company representative and her lawyer and me, we all met before a judge in downtown Raleigh. I had to go and sit there to talk out this claim and to give my, side of it. So just a sidebar for just a second. The things that they asked me for when I went before this judge is, these are things I've talked to you all about before. They asked me for every one of her evaluations. They asked me for her caregiver skills. They asked me for everything about that employee. So in case I came in there and said something like, well, she didn't ever do a good job and she didn't do what I told her. And then they would have looked at those great evaluations I gave her and it would have been inconsistent. So do your evaluations on time, do them accurately, because you may have to present those in court at some point. We all know that in healthcare, if you document something, it becomes a legal document. You may never have to put it in the legal system, but just make sure you are prepared. So we get there on the day that everything is going on. So finally, it became my turn to say what I needed to say. So I just was upfront. I said, she was a great employee. She did everything I asked her to do. I said, and I want her to be made whole. I don't want her to be hurt because she did everything. And I said, the amount of money, I'm not going to even call the number out. It was so much that I was paying in workers' comp because I had a large company. I said, I paid X number of dollars for the last 8, 9 years, and I've never had a claim. I said, so I would like for her to be made whole. So the judge looked at me and he had to keep himself from laughing because he knew I had kind of thrown my insurance company under the bus, but I was doing right by her because I had put in way more than enough money for them to pay her claim. I think her claim ended up being $5,000, which really was nothing. However, I had another case. This aide was very good as well in another county. She called one day and said that she had been hurt. Well, we went through the same process. We had a process where they go to the doctor and all of that stuff. And she eventually had to go to court too to get whatever her due was. Well, the insurance company that I had at the time was different. And so I was just really, really busy. So my agent said to me, he said, if you really don't have the time to come, he said, I'm representing you in the company and I will go. So I was really happy about that because, you know, I had this wonderful experience the time before. It was only $5,000. Well, you all, I did not go. I was just back doing business like you all are doing. About 60 days later, I got a readout of what that claim cost me. That claim cost my company $120,000. So, of course, the insurance company paid it, but I talked to you about my experience modification. It went up for 3 years. So say I was at 3%, excuse me, it maybe went up to 5%. So for 3 years, my premiums went up. So that's just, I said I had 2 cases and they were different, but I don't know if it would have made a difference had I gone. I was assuming some things. So I'm just letting you know, if you can go each time. I thought my insurance company was representing me and would take care of me, but there was a lot going on in the market at the time. So that is just my experience with that. And I wanted to share it so that you all don't make that mistake. Based on what I just said to you, that those employee injuries will impact your bottom line. When they went and took my rates up, then if I was paying $800 a month for insurance, it may have gone to $1,000. And it stayed that way for 3 years until my mod came back down. So that's what I had to cover with you all today. And as always, I like to give this disclaimer. What I like to let you all know is that I am happy to provide this information to you all. And I'm so happy that you all come to listen each month. I learn from you as well as the things you learn from me. But I do not want you to change anything in your policies and procedures. You go to your regulatory agencies, you go to the Department of Labor, the Department of Insurance, DHSR. You make sure that those individuals validate what I have told you and tell you exactly what you must do before you make any changes based on what I have said here.
Patty?
Yes.
I don't really have a question, but it's funny that you brought this topic up because I had a very, very trying experience just last week dealing with workers' comp. And I'm not sure if anybody on the call has heard, but I received a citation that I had he wasn't a federal bureau investigator. He was a state bureau investigator, came to my office because he was checking to see if I was hiring 1099 employees and if I was covered with workers' comp. Well, it turns out I did not have workers' comp, and I told him that I thought that it was 3 full-time employees, and he told me no. He said 3 employees, period, that including you as the owner. So they gave me a citation, and I had to immediately get coverage, and he said that by it being my first offense, I have to go to district court. And he said, when I get there, I'm going to see a lot of other people just like myself in the same situation. He said that he was covering the whole state of North Carolina, some of the regions, and he had been visiting a lot of home care businesses. So if you don't have coverage, you need to get it. He told me once I showed the judge that I did have coverage, they would throw it out. But if it was like a second offense that came around, I could be charged a misdemeanor. And I'm like, I didn't know it was that, I knew that you had to have workers' comp at some point, but I didn't know that it would give you a charge.
Mm.
And so I was just blown away. I was mad at myself. And I told him, I tried to explain to him that I didn't know that it was 3 regular workers. I thought it was 3 full-time. And I never, I hadn't had 3 full-time employees since I had been in business. Maybe 2, but not 3. And, the case has changed so much. So you may have it for a little while, and then you lose the client, to the hours changing. But yeah, that was my experience on last week. And yeah, that was that threw me for a loop. And so yeah, it's just, even if it's part-time, if you have 3 workers, you have to have, and that includes you, so just 2 workers then, you have to have insurance, and you cannot be working anyone as a 1099 unless they are contracting your company out, which means they don't wear your badge, you're not giving them a schedule, you're not giving them supplies, they're not going by your rules of your company. That's the only way you can contract out a nurse. Definitely you can't do it with your aide. So I wanted to share that from my experience, and I hope that it helps someone,
Okay,
as far as clarity.
Great, Paris. Thank you so much. Now, I believe I said earlier it was 3 full-time employees, because I think that's how it used to be, but I'm going to take your word for it that it is just 3 employees since you just went through this. And as I said, go to the labor board, you all, and check. But this happened to me. It was a different situation. I switched insurance companies. And so when those individuals that visited Paris, they saw that my insurance policy was no longer in force, but I immediately picked up the beginning of the month with a new company. They visited me as well. They came to my door and they said, we are here to see if you have workers' comp. And I showed them that I just ended with that company and I went with a new company. And so they just said, okay, I didn't get cited or anything, but it evidently generated something for them to come visit me. And it sounds like they target home care agencies. So you all just beware of that. I was in good shape, but just by them seeing that a company had discontinued my insurance, they didn't know, they didn't see that someone else picked it up. I don't know if it hadn't come through, but when they came to my office, I was able to show them. Okay, so Laura Clement.
Hi everyone. Hi, Patty.
Great.
I wanted to just confirm, the more employees you get, are you supposed to notify the insurance company? Do you know, or is this something that, it's just like a range of employees per quote?
Usually how it works is based on what Paris said, and this is what I did, if you're going to have a home care agency, you need to go ahead and get a workers' comp policy as soon as you start, because you're going to have 2-3 employees within no time, especially including yourself. So the way it works is your workers' comp is billed off of your total payroll. If your payroll is $100,000 and they're charging you 5%, that's $5,000, and you pay it by the month, unless you can just pay it all at once. So it's based on your payroll. Laura, they're not looking at the number of employees. The insurance company is not. They may look at that to do your risk factor, but they are looking at your total payroll. So when they come to you the first time to write your policy, they will say, what do you anticipate your payroll is going to be this year? You may say 100,000, but say, and this happened to me a few times, if you have a really big year, because I went from 2 figures to mid 6 figures in 1 year. And so I hadn't paid enough. So they come and they do an audit at the end of the year and they say, okay, Miss Parrish, you told me $80,000 for your payroll, but I see you did 350. They will bill you for the difference.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how that works. Now, this thing we're talking about with 2 employees, 3 employees, or whatever, that's labor law. That's labor law. They all work together, but they're looking at it in a different way. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Frank, did you have something?
Yeah, I was kind of just to your point, Patty, is you can tell them what you think it'll be, but if it starts going up, you want to give them an update during the year so you don't get a big hit at the end. And then we're with I'm trying to think the name of it now, where we've gone to monthly, and so at the end of the month we send them our payroll amount. And then the other thing is that you can have yourself excluded. Like if it's a financial crisis
As
or
the
a contract,
owner.
you're not
Mhm.
in
As the owner, you can exclude yourself to keep it down. So if you're paying yourself $60,000 a year, you can exclude that and they won't include that. So of course that makes your rate cheaper, $60,000 cheaper than what it would have been. So that's a very good point too, Frank. Thank you for making that point. Anyone else have a comment about injuries and workers' comp or any of those things? These are just things you all need to be aware of, and so that you don't run into it kind of like I did, but I had to just get through it. I always had my coverages. Oh, the other thing I thought as Frank was talking is once I got to a certain level, they started seeing how it was trending up. So when the insurance company came back to me each year, they started saying, okay, well, this year we think you're going to do 900,000. Then we think you're going to do 1.2 million. But I got to a point where it leveled off, and it was like that for maybe 3 or 4 years. And so I finally knew that I could go back to them and say, I've kind of hit a plateau and this is where I am. So I want to stay right here, but I didn't even know I could do that because one year, y'all, I got a $5,000 refund. They had billed me that much over what I was doing because I didn't catch on to the fact that they kept going up. So when they did my audit, they were so high that they gave me a refund. I didn't need them holding my $5,000. I could have done something else with that. And I know you all could too. So beware of that too, as you get up to a certain level. And if you level off and it's within a certain range, make sure that insurance company knows I'm not going to go up another 300,000 this year. Laura, did you have another question? Okay. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, it's related to not necessarily workers' comp. I just wanted to know, hiring nurses as far as RN, is it ideal to have them come in with their own malpractice? Is it required to have malpractice for them as well?
Well, the company's gonna need to have liability. I don't know if you call it malpractice, but it's liability insurance that will cover your employees. But a lot of nurses that work, no matter where they work, they have their own malpractice insurance. But as an agency owner, you're going to be involved if something goes wrong. So definitely, we're just talking about workers' comp today, but you should have 2 types of insurance. You should have workers' comp and your general liability insurance as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, are there?
Yeah. I had
Yes.
one quick question in terms of, I know all of our caregivers have to be employees. Can you contract with RNs like to do the assessments or outsource that some way? Or do they
Look,
also?
there's a couple of ways to look at that, Frank. You know that for every minute that you have an aide in the home, there's an RN that needs to be on call. So how do you 1099 that? Because if you've got aides in the home 24/7 or 16 hours a day, she needs to be on call. You're saying this is your schedule. Now, if you have one RN like that, maybe you pay her something by the hour or some fee to do all of that. But you may have extra RNs, which is what I did. Since I'm an RN myself, I kind of covered all of that. But I had 2 or 3 other RNs that I paid them by the visit. I paid them a certain amount to do a visit, a certain amount to do an assessment, and they kind of did it on their own schedule. But I still didn't do it as a 1099. I put it in as an hourly rate still, and they were under my workers' compensation policy. So just talk to your insurance company about it. You're just safer to put them in and let them be under workers' comp because they could get hurt. You just don't know what's going to happen. So that's just my opinion about it. Anyone else have a different opinion about that? Okay, are there questions about anything else today that's not related to the employee injuries? We've got a few more minutes.
Hi,
Hey,
Laura.
so-
Hi, Patty. I have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to know as far as, I know that you need to have the liability. That makes sense. But in terms of, if they are traveling, I guess if they're doing work for us and they're traveling and they get injured, we would be responsible to cover any sort of workman's comp or any sort of injury that they have sustained, correct?
Okay, this is my understanding, and I want you all to look into this. From their home to the first client, you really are not involved in that because they haven't checked in yet. But if they get to that first client and they go to that client, when they travel to the next client, they're still working for you, they're traveling for you, then you're liable for that travel. And then at the end of the day, when they're off, you are not liable for that on the way back home. Now, y'all, that is that's a slippery slope. But that is my understanding. So, and each situation is going to be looked at differently because these people are going to have attorneys and lawyers and all of that. But that is my understanding. Also, what I just mentioned is when your aide travels from client A to client B, you're actually supposed to pay them for that travel time.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
So I would look at it like that. Since you understand it that way, I would say workers' comp would apply from that travel from one client to the other, but check with your insurance company and your labor individuals.
Thank you, Patty.
Someone else had a question.
Yes, this is Anahita. How are you guys? I'm new to this meeting, and I'm in Charlotte currently, and I was very interested to start a non-medical home care agency in Charlotte. So I wanted to bounce with some people who are more familiar with this business. So for I'm just going to create my LLC company right now. I'm in that path. What would you recommend to me?
Okay, I would suggest if you're at this meeting, you probably got an email from me, or you know how to get in touch with me. So why don't you contact me directly and let me see if I can help you or give you some direction. I think that would be better.
I think I texted you in the meetup, so I think we are connected in a meetup.
Okay, all right then. Well, then send me your email address in the meetup, and then you and I can speak offline, okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Patty, I have another question.
Go ahead.
As far as the timesheet, do a nurse need to be the one to sign off on the timesheets at the end of the week, or can the director sign off as well?
I
Or is that
believe
necessary?
yes, I believe the rules, from what I recall, say that an RN should review those timesheets or those time records at some interval. I used to review mine weekly because that is where you can pick up on trends and things that are going on or wrong. Now, if you have an electronic system, there should be a way for an RN to go in there and look at things that may or may not be being done in case your aide is not reporting in as they should. So yes, Paris, you need to have those reviewed, and I would say your RN needs to review it because she wrote the care plan.
Okay, I have my nurse doing it. I was just wondering, I was networking with someone else, and we had kind of trying to figure out if we're supposed to have a nurse signing off, and I told them that was what I always done. But I
I think
don't
you're
think,
correct.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Patty. I was going to say, is there anyone that can recommend? I'm currently shopping for an EBV system. I didn't know if one person was having more success with one over the other. Any recommendation?
Brandon, aren't you going to do Medicaid?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you check into SanData because it's free for Medicaid North Carolina?
I will. I have not checked into
Okay,
SanData.
that's the first one you should look at is SanData. They have the contract for North Carolina, and they have a free version that you can use for North Carolina Medicaid.
Okay.
You don't have to use that. There are other systems that some of these people may be using, but I'd suggest you look into SanData first so that
Okay.
you don't have to pay a fee right off.
Perfect. Good deal. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'll reach out to you for more, I guess, a consult at some point too, Miss Patty.
Okay, that'll be
Thank you.
fine. Any other questions? Okay, well, this has been good. And like I said, most of you, if you got to me through the meetup, just message me and we can get together. The rest of you probably got an email from me. If there's anything you need, please let me know. I'm here. I hear from a lot of you all the time, and I'm more than happy to be with you all because, as I said, I'm learning as well. So I want you all to have a really good weekend, and we'll be back here next month on the second Friday at 1 p.m. And I will get in contact with you all if there are others that you think would benefit from this meeting. I really like for it to be owners and nurses, people that are in a management capacity or someone thinking about going into business. Please invite them. We'll be glad to have them. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good day.
you.